3 spells, no mercy. 1 kills, 1 breaks, 1 steals your will. The ministry banned them in terror, yet history refuses to name their maker. That's not a gap. It's a cover shadow. If no wizard takes credit, who whispered the first words? A monster from the Dark Ages? A secret cabal? Or something far older than Hogwarts itself? Stay with me, because once we follow the breadcrumbs the books won't print, you'll never hear Avada Kedavra, Crucio, or Imperio the same way again. Start with what we actually know. In 1717, the ministry didn't invent Avada Kedavra, Crucio, or Imperio. It finally slammed a legal stamp on them. Unforgivable wasn't a birth certificate, it was a warning label. The damage was already everywhere. Dual reports gone silent mid-sentence, healers treating pain that had no wound, victims walking like puppets with their strings pulled tight. The law just caught up to the nightmares. Here's the part most histories whisper past. A ban this severe means the spells had spread far beyond back rooms and war camps. They were reliable, repeatable, taught in the dark and traded like contraband sheet music. That's why the ministry drew a border, not a blueprint. It wasn't asking what these curses were. It was begging wizards to stop pretending they could be used responsibly. Quick deal. If I drop one fact you didn't know in the next minute, you Imperio your thumb onto the subscribe button. Consent-based, of course. If not, you can roast me in the comments for ministry propaganda. Fair? Because to find the maker, we have to step past the paperwork and into the centuries before the stamp. Back to the era when cursecraft was evolving in the dark. Hit subscribe before the ministry classifies this video as unforgivable, and I end up doing Azkaban time for educating. Spin the clock back to a world without rulebooks, where spells weren't published, they were whispered. Cursecraft traveled hand to hand. A mentor who didn't ask questions, a duelist who traded secrets for safety, a scribe who jotted the ugliest magic in a notebook no one would ever admit existed. Nothing about the Unforgivables feels modern. Even their names carry dust. Cruciatus reads like it walked straight out of Latin, pure torment. Imperius comes from imperium, authority, domination, the right to command. And Avada Kedavra echoes an ancient Near Eastern phrase twisted from protection into erasure. That's not pop magic. That's sediment. Layers of language laid down over centuries. Spells don't arrive fully weaponized. First comes the crude draft. Pain that flickers, control that slips, killing that fails if the will wavers. Then the edits. Someone relentless sands the edges. The wand motion tightens. The words sharpen. The intent hardens. Each generation keeps the parts that work and throws away the noise until the results become terrifyingly consistent. By the time the ministry stamped Unforgivable in 1717, these curses weren't curiosities. They were standardized, repeatable enough that anyone cold enough to mean them could make them bite. And that meaning it piece matters. Plenty of hexes fire on technique alone. These 3 run on motive. Crucio doesn't fully answer unless you want the pain to land. Imperio resists sloppy minds. Avada Kedavra won't fake itself for shaky hands or soft hearts. That's why the legal label hit so hard. It wasn't a ban on syllables, it was a verdict on intent. So who did the refining? History won't give us a signature, but certain names keep surfacing in the soot. One in particular slithers through every dark corridor of rumor, the kind of wizard who had the time, the obsession, and the appetite to perfect horror. Herpo the Foul. If you're searching for a maker, start with the man who treated dark magic like a research project. Herpo the Foul Ancient, obsessive, a confirmed Parselmouth, bred the first basilisk and is credited as the earliest wizard to split a soul. That resume isn't just wicked, it's method. He experimented, refined, and standardized horror long before ministries existed. If anyone had the patience to turn crude pain, shaky mind control, and unreliable killing into reliable tools, it was him. The timeline fits. So does the mentality. Herpo's work wasn't flashy. It was procedural. Rituals, intent, repeatable outcomes. That's the same DNA the Unforgivables require. And if you're wondering about the Latin names, remember, incantations drift, spells cross borders, languages mutate, and the words we know today aren't necessarily the syllables first whispered in a cave. A Greek origin could easily wear Latin clothing by the time Hogwarts cataloged it. Do we have a confession? No. Dark pioneers didn't leave neat footnotes. But when history refuses to name a father, you follow the fingerprints. Ancient experimentation, serpent lore, soulcraft, and a reputation for many vile curses. Herpo sits at the crossroads of all of it. Of course, not everyone points to one wizard. Some say the truth was split 3 ways, from a different set of brothers with a very famous story. When the records go silent, fans start connecting dots. 3 brothers, 3 curses. It sounds elegant. Antioch Peverell, obsessed with unbeatable power, lines up with the killing curse. Cadmus, haunted by loss, echoes raw suffering. Ignotus, master of concealment and escape, mirrors domination and control. It's clean, it's cinematic, and it's probably wrong. Here's why. The Peverells are tied to the Hallows. Artifacts, not incantations. Their legend is about tools that bend fate, not words that weaponize intent. Ignotus is portrayed as measured, even merciful, the last person you'd expect to prototype mind enslavement. Cadmus's tragedy is grief, not sadism. Antioch chases dueling clout, but that's different from inventing a killing spell older than most languages we use to describe it. There's also the timeline problem. The Unforgivables read like pre-Peverell craft. Incantations that evolved across borders, languages, and wars. By the time the brothers become famous, these curses already feel standardized. If anything, the Elder Wand might have amplified them rather than birthed them. Picture a brutal loop. A wand built for victory supercharges spells designed for certainty. Pain that always lands, commands that always stick, strikes that always finish. Still, the theory lingers because it hits a nerve. The Hallows promise shortcuts. The curses are shortcuts. Skip struggle, seize control, erase obstacles. That philosophical rhyme keeps pulling the Peverells back into the suspect lineup even if the evidence doesn't. Poetic? Absolutely. Proven? Not even close. So, if not the brothers, who pushed the curses from crude to dependable, the trail points to war rooms, black market tutors, and one ministry official who turned a whisper into policy. If this just killed a favorite fan theory, you owe me a tiny resurrection. Tap subscribe. Think of it as the ethical version of Imperio. You keep control, I keep dropping deep lore that actually checks out. Next up, how these spells went from basement secrets to classroom lessons. Nothing spreads a bad idea faster than a good war. In the first wizarding conflict, fear did what fear always does. It bent the rulebook. Barty Crouch Sr. gave Aurors permission to use the Unforgivables on Death Eaters, trading moral high ground for results. That's the moment a back-alley toolkit became a state-sanctioned option. Once professionals use a spell, it stops being rumor and starts being procedure. Then came the classroom. In Harry's 4th year, Moody didn't just mention the Unforgivables. He demonstrated them. A generation watched the 3 most feared incantations performed like a dark anatomy lesson. You can call it education, you can call it desensitization. But either way, the names, effects, and expectations were now standardized in teenagers' heads. Under Voldemort's regime, the line vanished entirely. The Carrows made pain a homework assignment. Imperius turned officials into mouthpieces. Avada Kedavra wasn't a threat. It was policy enforcement. When power structures normalize a spell, it multiplies. Snatchers copy it, sympathizers drill it, bystanders learn it just to survive it. That's how basement magic becomes common language. By the end of that era, the Unforgivables were no longer secret so much as reliable, and reliability is the real horror. It tells you these curses were refined long before any ministry stamped them illegal, which begs the next question. Why these 3? What do they demand from a caster that ordinary dark magic doesn't? Most dark magic wounds. These 3 erase boundaries. Each targets a pillar of being. Crucio breaks the body's experience. Imperio hijacks the mind. Avada Kedavra ends life. Single purpose. No gray area. That's the first red flag. They also run on motive, not just mechanics. Bellatrix wasn't bluffing. Crucio won't bite unless you want the pain to land. Imperio collapses under a strong will. Cast it lazy, and it slips. Avada Kedavra demands lethal intent. You can't test it. You either mean it, or nothing happens. Technique helps, but intent is the engine. Defense tells the rest of the story. Protego shrugs at jinxes. It fails against a clean killing curse. You need obstacles, ancient protections, or raw luck to survive Avada Kedavra. There's no neat counterspell. Imperius can be resisted, but only by wresting back your own thoughts. Cruciatus has no tidy antidote. At best, you end it or you endure it. These aren't tools you outparry. They're lines you don't cross, and they scale too well. The more focused the caster, the more certain the outcome. That reliability is why the ministry didn't just call them illegal. It called them unforgivable. Not because the syllables are special, but because the spells demand a piece of the caster that a decent person shouldn't give. But is unforgivable a universal truth, or a legal label that shifts with politics and power? That's where things get messy. Unforgivable sounds absolute, but it started as policy, a British label. Other ministries draw their lines differently, and history keeps moving the posts. In one era, aurors get exceptions in war. In another, the regime flips and turns those same curses into standard procedure. Same syllables, new rules, depending on who holds the quill. That's why the debate never dies. Some argue these spells are just tools, neutral words that do what the caster wants. The counterpoint is sharper. Intent is the payload, and these 3 require the worst kind of intent. Even when fiction reintroduces them to a new generation, the reaction splits. Half the crowd treats them like mechanics to master. The other half asks why a world that calls them unforgivable keeps finding reasons to forgive their use. Zoom out, and a pattern appears. When fear rises, the ban looks negotiable. When peace returns, the moral memory snaps back and calls the same acts monstrous. The label is legal, the recoil is human. Which brings us back to the real question. If the name we use is political, the origin probably isn't. So who forged them in the first place? And why did history bury the signature? If you're waiting for a single signature, there isn't one. The Unforgivable Curses read like inventions by committee, cruel minds over centuries, sanding rough drafts into certainty. Maybe a pioneer like Herpo pushed them forward. Maybe war rooms and black market tutors finished the job. The ministry didn't name a creator. It rang an alarm. And that tells you everything. These spells weren't born in a moment. They were refined by repetition, then branded when the damage could no longer be ignored. In the end, the maker isn't a person. It's a process powered by intent. Every time someone means these words with their whole will, the curse is created again. If this changed how you see Avada Kedavra, Crucio, and Imperio, give the algorithm a little moral dilemma. Subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive, drop a comment with your prime suspect, and share this with the one friend who always argues the Peverell Theory. Next up, the one defense that almost rewrites the rules. So who created the Unforgivable Curses? No single genius, no dramatic confession. Just centuries of ruthless tinkering until pain, control, and death became terrifyingly reliable. The ministry stamped them unforgivable after the damage was already done, because the real engine was never the syllables, it was intent. And that's the part history can't archive. Every time someone truly means these words, the curses are born again. If that flipped how you see Avada Kedavra, Crucio, and Imperio, don't let this be your last deep dive. Tap subscribe and ring the bell so you're here when we break down.